23,000 feet above Nazi-occupied France. August 1943. The temperature is 40 below zero, but inside the cockpit of a P-47 Thunderbolt, 2nd Lieutenant Robert Johnson's blood is boiling. His gunsight tracks a Focke-Wulf 190, the Luftwaffe's pride, flown by a pilot who's killed dozens of Allied airmen. The German is fast, agile, confident. 6 months ago, pilots like him laughed when they first saw the P-47. They called it Die Jug, the flying milk jug. Too heavy. Too slow. Too American. They're not laughing anymore. Johnson's thumb hovers over the trigger. 8 Browning M250 caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing, are loaded and waiting. When they fire together, they don't just shoot. They erase. 3,200 rounds per minute of pure American fury, each bullet traveling nearly 3,000 feet per second. The sound alone is like thunder ripping through metal. The German pilot doesn't see him yet. He's focused on a crippled B-17 limping home, filled with young men just trying to survive another mission over the Reich. He's moving in for the kill, because that's what Luftwaffe aces do. That's what they've done since 1939, racking up victories while the world burned. But today, the hunter becomes the hunted. Johnson's finger tightens. The Thunderbolt shudders as 8 guns unleash hell. The convergence point, where all 8 streams of lead meet, intersects perfectly with the FW-190's fuselage. For one frozen second, you can see the impacts, metal shredding, pieces flying, the German's cockpit disintegrating. 3 seconds. That's all it takes. The FW-190 tumbles out of formation, trailing smoke and fury, spinning toward the French countryside below. The bomber flies on. Another crew gets to go home. Another Nazi ace learns the hardest lesson: you can mock American engineering all you want, but you can't outfly physics. This moment, this reversal, didn't happen by accident. It was the result of innovation, adaptation, and something the Luftwaffe never saw coming: immigrant ingenuity meeting American industrial might. 6 months earlier, the Germans owned these skies. They'd been winning so long they thought they were invincible. They saw the P-47 and they laughed. But how did we get here? How did the joke become the nightmare? How did a fighter plane that everyone dismissed become the weapon that broke the Luftwaffe's back? To understand that, we need to go back to the beginning. Early 1943. The skies over Nazi Germany are a graveyard. Every day, the United States 8th Air Force sends waves of B-17 flying fortresses and B-24 Liberators deep into the Reich, targeting factories, rail yards, oil refineries. The strategic bombing campaign is supposed to cripple Hitler's war machine, break German morale, pave the way for invasion. But it's not working. Because the bombers are dying. On a single mission to Schweinfurt in October 1943, 60 B-17s will be shot down. 600 young men, gone in one afternoon. Crews are calculating their odds of survival, and the math is brutal. Statistically, you won't make it to 25 missions. You'll die over Germany, or if you're lucky, spend the rest of the war in a POW camp. The problem is simple and horrifying: American bombers have no fighter escorts that can go the distance. The P-38 Lightning has range issues and engine problems in the frozen air at altitude. The P-51 Mustang, the fighter that will eventually dominate European skies, is still being developed, still months away from deployment in meaningful numbers. So the bombers go in alone. And the Luftwaffe is waiting. These aren't green pilots stumbling through their first combat. These are veterans. Men who've been killing since the Spanish Civil War in 1936. Pilots who cut their teeth over Poland, perfected their tactics over France, survived the Battle of Britain, and racked up staggering kill counts on the Eastern Front against the Soviets. They fly Focke-Wulf 190s, brutal, powerful fighters designed by Kurt Tank. They fly Messerschmitt Bf-109s, the legendary machine that's been in continuous production since before the war started. These aircraft are fast, maneuverable, deadly, and flown by men who know exactly what they're doing. The Luftwaffe doesn't just have experience. They have confidence bordering on arrogance. They've been told they're the elite. They've been winning for so long that Allied losses feel inevitable, almost routine. Every formation of American bombers is another opportunity for kills, another chance to add to their scores. Meanwhile, American doctrine is unproven. The pilots are young, undertrained, desperate. The strategic bombing campaign, the entire plan to defeat Germany from the air, is on the verge of collapse. Generals are having quiet conversations about whether it's sustainable. How many boys can you send to die before the math stops making sense? Into this meat grinder, in the spring of 1943, comes the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't look like salvation. It looks like exactly what the Germans will call it, a flying milk jug. A massive, bulky fighter that seems to defy the very idea of aerial combat. At over 10,000 pounds fully loaded, it's the heaviest single-engine fighter anyone has ever built. It's powered by a Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, 2,000 horsepower of American engineering, but even that enormous power plant seems barely enough to get the beast airborne. The first P-47 squadrons begin flying escort missions over France and the Low Countries. They're learning, adapting, trying to figure out how to use this strange new weapon. But from the ground, from command headquarters, from the bomber crews who need protection, it's unclear if the Thunderbolt is the answer or just another expensive experiment. And the Germans notice. They see this ungainly American machine lumbering into their skies, and they're not impressed. They've faced everything the Allies have thrown at them. They've beaten it all. Why should this be any different? They're about to find out. But first, we need to understand who built this beast, and who was waiting to shoot it down. The P-47 Thunderbolt was designed by a man the Nazis would have sent to a camp. Alexander Kartveli. Born in the Republic of Georgia, educated in Paris, immigrated to America in 1927 with nothing but talent and ambition. He didn't speak perfect English. He didn't come from money or connections. He came because America promised something the old world didn't, the chance to build something that mattered. By 1940, he was chief engineer at Republic Aviation. And he had a vision, a fighter plane that could absorb punishment, deliver devastating firepower, and bring American boys home alive. Not elegant. Not graceful. Practical. Survivable. Deadly. The result was a 7-ton monster powered by an engine that produced more horsepower than 2 Cadillacs combined. 850 caliber machine guns. Armor plating around the cockpit. A turbocharger that let it breathe at altitudes where other fighters choked. It wasn't designed to dance with the enemy. It was designed to hit them like a freight train and keep flying. The men who flew it came from everywhere. Farm boys from Iowa who'd never seen an airplane until they enlisted. Factory workers' sons from Detroit. First-generation Italian Americans, Polish Americans, Jewish kids from Brooklyn fighting the regime that was murdering their families across the ocean. Men like Francis Gabreski, son of Polish immigrants, who would become one of America's top aces, flying for a country his parents chose and a homeland they'd left behind. These weren't aristocrats playing at war. They were mechanics' sons flying a mechanic's dream, a plane you could fix with a wrench and fly home with half a wing shot off. Their training was measured in months, not years. Many had never fired a gun in anger before climbing into that cockpit. But they had something the Luftwaffe didn't understand. They weren't fighting for conquest or ideology. They were fighting to end the war and go home. To protect the bombers, fellow Americans, just kids like them, trapped in flying coffins over hostile territory. The mission was simple: get them home. Kill anyone who tries to stop you. Survive. Facing them were the legends. Luftwaffe aces with kills in the dozens, some approaching triple digits. Men who'd been hunting since before America even entered the war. They flew Focke-Wulf 190s, sleek killers designed by Kurt Tank, one of the Reich's most brilliant engineers. Fast. Agile. Proven in combat from the English Channel to the Russian steppes. These German pilots weren't just skilled, they were arrogant. And why shouldn't they be? They'd shot down Spitfires, Hurricanes, Soviet Yaks by the thousands. They were the predators. Everyone else was prey. When they first encountered the P-47, they saw exactly what they expected from Americans: brute force without finesse. A flying tank. Crude. Heavy. Slow in a turn. The kind of plane that confirmed every stereotype about American engineering: all muscle, no elegance. They had a nickname for it. Die Jug. The Jug. Some called it the flying milk bottle. The implication was clear: this was a joke. A target. Another easy kill to add to their tallies. German tactical briefings dismissed it. Interrogation reports show captured Luftwaffe pilots laughing about it even after being shot down. The confidence wasn't just professional, it was cultural. They were the masters of the sky. This fat American experiment wouldn't change that. They were wrong. And they were about to pay for that mistake with their lives. April 15, 1943. Somewhere over occupied Belgium, the Luftwaffe gets its first good look at America's new fighter. The German pilots can't believe what they're seeing. Radio chatter captured by Allied intelligence tells the story. Laughter. Actual laughter crackling through the static. One pilot radios back to base, "They've sent us refrigerators to shoot down." Another calls them fat American turkeys, flying to their slaughter. The mockery isn't just talk. It's strategic assessment, or what the Germans think is strategic assessment. Intelligence reports from captured Luftwaffe officers show the same dismissive pattern. One tactical briefing from Jagdgeschwader 2, one of Germany's elite fighter wings, describes the P-47 as lacking maneuverability, unsuited for combat at operational altitudes, no significant threat to experienced pilots. Translation, easy meat. And in those first encounters, it's hard to argue with them. Because at low altitude, in a traditional dogfight, the P-47 is at a disadvantage. The Focke-Wulf 190 can outturn it. The Messerschmitt can outclimb it in the initial engagement. German pilots have been winning turning fights since Spain. This is their home court, and they know it. Watch what happens when a P-47 squadron from the 78th Fighter Group jumps a Luftwaffe formation over the coast. The Americans have altitude, they have position, they have surprise. They dive in, guns blazing, and the Germans simply scatter, then regroup. Because they're not afraid. They've seen this before. Aggressive enemy fighters diving in, burning energy, trying for quick kills. The Luftwaffe response is practiced, almost casual. Split the formation. Bleed the attacker's speed. Bring them down into a turning fight where experience and agility win. And it works. The P-47s follow them down, trying to press the advantage, and suddenly they're the ones in trouble. Turning. Burning speed. Getting slow. That's when the FW-190s come around, tight and fast, and the Americans have to break off or die. You can almost see the smirks behind the oxygen masks. The Luftwaffe pilots know they've just schooled the new guys. Another batch of Americans learning the hard way that combat isn't about size or firepower, it's about skill. And the Germans have it. The propaganda writes itself. German radio broadcasts mock American engineering, too much steel, not enough skill. Captured pilot interrogation reports describe the P-47 as the flying bathtub or the 7-ton milk wagon. It's not just trash talk. It's contempt, born from real victories. This wasn't tactical assessment. This was arrogance wrapped in evidence. Because from the Luftwaffe's perspective, why shouldn't they be confident? They'd faced the best Britain had, Spitfires, Hurricanes, the legendary fighters of the RAF, and traded kills favorably. They destroyed thousands of Soviet aircraft. They'd been winning this war in the air since it started. Why would this bloated American experiment be any different? Meanwhile, American pilots are filing combat reports filled with frustration. Aircraft too heavy for sustained turning engagements. Unable to match enemy maneuverability below 15,000 feet. Recommendation: avoid low-altitude combat. Morale is shaky. Bomber crews who desperately need protection are watching their escorts get outflown by pilots who've been doing this since before Pearl Harbor. The math is grim. The P-51 Mustang is still months away. The P-38 has problems. And the P-47, the plane that was supposed to change everything, looks like just another target. For those first few weeks, it seems like the Germans are right. The Thunderbolt seems outmatched. The joke seems justified. But something else is happening. Something the Luftwaffe doesn't see yet. American pilots are learning. They're analyzing. They're adapting. Squadron commanders like Hub Zemke are running the numbers, studying the combat reports, figuring out what works and what doesn't. And they're realizing something the Germans haven't considered: you don't have to fight the enemy's fight. You can make them fight yours. The Luftwaffe is about to learn a very hard lesson. Not about grace or agility or tradition. About physics. About energy. About what happens when 850 caliber machine guns meet arrogance at 400 miles per hour. Late spring, 1943. The tension in the skies over Europe is rising like a summer storm. The Luftwaffe isn't backing down. If anything, they're getting bolder. German fighter formations start engaging P-47s head-on, attacking with the confidence of men who've already decided the outcome. They've developed specific tactics, refined through blood and experience, force the Thunderbolt low, force it slow, then tear it apart in a turning fight where the FW-190's agility wins every time. It's working. Losses mount on both sides, but the Germans remain supremely confident. These Americans are learning the hard way what veterans already know: you can't compensate for inexperience with horsepower. The insults keep coming. Captured Luftwaffe pilots, sitting in Allied interrogation rooms after being shot down by other aircraft, still mock the P-47. One pilot, pulled from the wreckage of his Messerschmitt near Rotterdam, laughs when asked about the Thunderbolt. "We call them the 7-ton milk trucks." Dangerous? Only if you're stupid enough to let one catch you in a dive. German tactical bulletins echo the sentiment. A May 1943 directive from Luftwaffe High Command: the P-47 presents no significant threat in sustained air combat. Engage at low to medium altitude where superior maneuverability negates American advantages in armor and firepower. Even some American commanders are starting to question the platform. Whispered conversations in briefing rooms: maybe we backed the wrong horse. Maybe we should wait for the Mustang. The pressure is building. Bomber losses are still catastrophic. Something has to change, and it's not clear the P-47 is the answer. But something is shifting. Something the Germans don't see yet. American pilots stop trying to dogfight. They stop chasing FW-190s into turning engagements they can't win. Squadron leaders like Hub Zemke, methodical, brilliant, immigrant son who understands that adaptation beats tradition, start drilling new tactics into their men. Don't fight their fight. Fight yours. The P-47's advantages become doctrine. Dive speed: the Thunderbolt can push 500 miles per hour in a dive, speeds where German fighters start coming apart from structural stress. Altitude performance: that massive turbocharger means at 25,000 feet, the Americans breathe easy while the Luftwaffe is gasping. Durability: take the hits, keep flying, come home. Firepower: 8 guns don't need a long firing window, 1 second is enough to shred anything. The transformation is visible in the combat reports. Early missions: frantic, defensive, frustrated. May and June missions: calm, controlled, predatory. One party is visibly rattled. The other has found their center. Luftwaffe after-action reports start noting something strange. American fighters refusing standard combat engagement. Enemy tactics unexpectedly aggressive at high altitude. There's confusion in those words. A crack in the confidence. Because the Americans aren't running anymore. They're hunting. June 12, 1943. Major air battle over the Ruhr Valley, Germany's industrial heartland, thick with flak and fighters. A formation of FW-190s from Jägerschwadron 26, one of the Luftwaffe's elite units, spots P-47s from the 56th Fighter Group escorting bombers. The Germans attack with textbook precision, diving from the sun, expecting the Americans to either scatter or turn to engage. Either response is a win. Scattered formations are vulnerable. Turning fights favor the agile FW-190. But the P-47s don't scatter. And they don't turn. Instead, they climb. Full throttle, using that massive engine and turbocharger to gain altitude even as the Germans are diving. It's counterintuitive. It looks like retreat. It's not. The FW-190s pull up from their attack run, looking for targets. The P-47s are above them now, engines roaring, speed building. And then they come down like thunder from a clear sky. Boom and zoom. Dive at full speed, fire a devastating burst from 850 caliber guns, use the momentum to climb back to altitude before the enemy can react. Don't dogfight. Don't turn. Hit and climb. Hit and climb. The German formation breaks. Not tactically, they're panicked. This isn't how it's supposed to work. Americans don't dictate the terms of engagement. They don't control the altitude, the speed, the tempo. But they just did. Radio intercepts capture the confusion. German pilots calling warnings to each other, Achtung. They are above us again. How are they climbing so fast? The answer is physics. The answer is engineering. The answer is an immigrant designer and American industrial power and pilots who stopped trying to be something they weren't. And that's when Hub Zemke's voice crackles over the radio to his squadron, calm as Sunday morning. Gentlemen, I believe they're starting to understand. Let's teach them the rest of the lesson. June 26, 1943. Second Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson is about to become a legend. His P-47 Thunderbolt is over France, escorting bombers home, when a formation of FW-190s jumps him. Not a probe. Not a test. An execution. The lead German pilot, experienced, precise, deadly, gets on Johnson's tail and opens fire. Cannon shells. 20mm high-explosive rounds designed to tear aircraft apart. They hit Johnson's P-47 like hammers against an anvil. The canopy shatters. The fuselage is shredded. Hydraulic fluid sprays. Oil streams. The oxygen system explodes. Any other fighter, British, German, Soviet, disintegrates. The pilot is already dead, the aircraft already falling. But this is a Thunderbolt. Johnson is bleeding, half blinded by wind and debris, his aircraft a flying wreck held together by American steel and immigrant engineering. The German pilot closes in for the kill shot. He fires again. And again. The P-47 absorbs hit after hit, 21 cannon shell impacts, countless machine gun rounds. And it keeps flying. Johnson, barely conscious, does the only thing he can, he keeps the throttle forward and dives for England. The FW-190 follows, still firing, still convinced this kill is inevitable. But Johnson's aircraft, this 7-ton beast everyone mocked, refuses to die. Across the channel. Over the English coast. The German finally breaks off, out of ammunition, watching in disbelief as his target limps toward an airfield. Johnson lands. Ground crews rush to the aircraft and stop cold. They count the damage, 21 cannon strikes. Over 200 machine gun hits. The tail is Swiss cheese. The wings are shredded. The cockpit looks like it went through a blender. One crew chief, staring at the wreckage, says what everyone is thinking, this shouldn't be possible. But it is. Because Alexander Cardvelli built a fortress, not a ballerina. And that fortress just saved an American boy's life. Let that sink in for a moment. The Germans had reported Johnson as a confirmed kill. Somewhere in a Luftwaffe headquarters, an intelligence officer had already added a tally mark to that pilot's score. But the next morning, Robert S. Johnson is eating breakfast, planning his next mission. Word spreads through the 8th Air Force like wildfire. Pilots crowd around Johnson's destroyed aircraft, touching the holes, counting the impacts, realizing what it means, you can get hit and survive. You can take punishment that would kill anyone else and make it home. The psychological shift is seismic. Fear doesn't disappear, but it changes shape. These men are still flying into hell, but now they know their aircraft can take them through it and bring them back. The Germans are about to learn the same lesson from the other side. August 17, 1943. The Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid. One of the largest, bloodiest air battles of the war. Hundreds of B-17 striking deep into Germany, and the Luftwaffe throws everything they have at them. But this time, the P-47s aren't just along for the ride. They own the high ground. Watch what happens. The Thunderbolts start at 30,000 feet, altitude where the turbocharged or 2800 engine is still producing full power while German fighters are struggling to breathe. Luftwaffe formations climbing to intercept the bombers suddenly have American fighters above them, diving at speeds no FW-190 can match. The first pass is devastating. A P-47 dives from altitude at over 500 miles per hour. The German pilots see it coming but can't react fast enough. 850 caliber machine guns converge on a single point. The sound is ungodly, not individual shots but a continuous roar, like fabric ripping amplified 1,000 times. 3 seconds of fire. That's all it takes. The FW-190 comes apart in midair, pieces tumbling separately toward the earth below. The P-47 pulls up, using massive engine power and dive speed to climb back to altitude before the German formation can even turn to engage. By the time they're looking for revenge, the American is already above them again, setting up another pass. This isn't dogfighting. This is execution. The Luftwaffe scatters, trying to climb to the P-47's altitude, but the turbocharger advantage is absolute. At 25,000 feet and above, the Americans dictate every engagement. Dive, fire, climb. Dive, fire, climb. The Germans can't catch them, can't outclimb them, can't escape them. Intelligence intercepts capture the panic. German pilots radioing warnings, Achtung. Thunderbolts high. Tactical communications breaking down. Formations dissolving. Because the hunters have become the hunted. Within weeks, Luftwaffe Command issues a new directive. Read it carefully, because this is where the mockery dies. Avoid engagement with P-47 aircraft above 20,000 feet. Their altitude, performance, and firepower present extreme danger. Do not attempt sustained combat. They went from laughter to avoidance in 4 months. Let me introduce you to Francis Gabreski. His parents came from Poland, chasing the American dream while their homeland was swallowed by empires. Now their son is fighting for the country that gave his family a chance, and for the homeland they left behind, now crushed under Nazi occupation. Gabreski isn't flashy. He's methodical, patient, brutal in execution. He learns the P-47 strengths and uses them like a surgeon uses a scalpel. 28 confirmed kills. 28 German pilots who underestimated the farm kid from Well City, Pennsylvania. His technique becomes the template. Stay high. Stay fast. Don't chase. Don't show off. See the enemy, position for advantage, execute with overwhelming firepower, return to altitude. It's not romantic. It's not chivalrous. It's effective. And effectiveness is what wins wars. The firepower difference becomes a nightmare for the Luftwaffe. German fighters typically carry 2 20mm cannons and 2 machine guns. Devastating in skilled hands, but requiring precision and sustained fire. The P-47 has 850 caliber Brownings. They don't need precision. They create a cone of destruction 60 feet wide at combat range. If any part of that cone touches you, you're done. American pilots describe it in their reports. You don't aim at specific parts of the aircraft. You aim at the general area and let the guns do the work. One pilot compared it to a fire hose versus a rifle. Both can kill you, but one doesn't require perfect aim. The Luftwaffe's tactical doctrine, built on years of success, becomes irrelevant. You can't outturn a bullet traveling 2,900 feet per second. You can't outmaneuver physics. Captured German pilots, late 1943, sit in interrogation rooms with a different tone. The mockery is gone. One pilot asked about the P-47, "It is extremely dangerous. We were told it was easy prey. We lost 5 aircraft in one engagement. They have altitude, speed, firepower, everything." Adolf Galland, the Luftwaffe's general of fighters, one of Germany's most respected aces, writes in his tactical assessment, "The P-47 has proven to be a formidable opponent. Its durability and firepower make it a serious threat to our operations." That's not respect. That's fear dressed in military language. By the end of 1943, the numbers tell the story the Germans don't want to admit. P-47 pilots have claimed over 2,000 aerial victories. Loss ratios have reversed completely. Early missions had Americans losing aircraft at unsustainable rates. By fall, P-47s are killing 3 to 4 German fighters for every loss. The sky over Europe is changing hands. Here's the moment worth remembering. The quotable truth that echoes through history: they laughed at the jug. They called it a flying milk truck, a bathtub with wings, an American joke. But you can't laugh when your wingman is spinning to earth in flames and the American who killed him is already climbing for his next victim. You can't laugh when the sky rains lead and your tactics don't matter anymore. The P-47 Thunderbolt didn't win by being elegant. It won by being unbreakable, unstoppable, and utterly without mercy when those 8 guns opened fire. The reports spread through Allied command like electricity through a wire. 8th Air Force Headquarters in England start seeing combat effectiveness numbers they haven't seen since the air war began. Mission after mission, the pattern holds: P-47 squadrons engaging Luftwaffe formations, killing ratios climbing, bomber losses dropping. Something fundamental has shifted. British RAF commanders, watching from their own bases, take notice. These are men who've been fighting Germany since 1939, who survived the Battle of Britain, who know what German fighters can do. And they're watching American pilots, kids who were civilians 2 years ago, dominate the Luftwaffe's best. One RAF group captain writes in his diary, "The Americans have found their weapon. The Thunderbolt, which we thought was too heavy for combat, has become the bludgeon that's breaking Jerry's back. But the most important voices are the ones that matter most, the bomber crews. B-17 pilots and gunners who've been flying into hell every mission, watching friends die, calculating impossible odds. They start seeing P-47s overhead and something changes. Relief. Hope. One bomber pilot's letter home: "When I see those big beautiful jugs up there, I know we're coming home." The Germans used to own the sky. Not anymore. Morale doesn't just improve. It transforms. Crews volunteer for missions they would have dreaded months earlier. Because they're not alone anymore. They have guardian angels made of steel and fury. The German response tells you everything you need to know. Tactical directives from Luftwaffe High Command shift dramatically. Summer 1943 briefings warned pilots the P-47 was no serious threat. Fall 1943 directives read like admissions of defeat: avoid high-altitude engagement with P-47 formations. Prioritize attacks on bombers only when fighter escort is not present. Exercise extreme caution. Some Luftwaffe units stopped trying to engage P-47s altogether, focusing exclusively on hitting bombers and running before the escorts can react. It's not cowardice, it's survival. The pilots who ignored the warnings are already dead. Captured German aviators, sitting in POW camps in England and America, confirm what the intelligence reports suggest. One FW-190 pilot, shot down in October 1943, we were told the P-47 was slow and clumsy. That was true at low altitude. But they stopped fighting at low altitude. They stayed high, where their power and guns gave them every advantage. We had no answer for it. Another, more blunt, the Thunderbolt changed the war. Before, we hunted the bombers freely. After, we were the ones being hunted. That's not tactical assessment. That's trauma. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the American war machine responds to success the only way it knows how: overwhelming production. Republic Aviation's factories in Farmingdale, New York, go into overdrive. Assembly lines that were producing dozens of P-47s per month start producing dozens per week. By war's end, over 15,000 Thunderbolts will roll off American production lines, more than any other Allied fighter except the Soviet Yak series. Every theater of war wants them. The Pacific commands, watching P-47s tear through Japanese fighters with the same brutality they showed the Luftwaffe. The Mediterranean, where Thunderbolts support the Italian campaign. Even the China-Burma-India theater, where the rugged reliability matters as much as the firepower. But Europe is where the legend solidifies. Because the P-47 proves something that changes fighter doctrine forever: energy tactics beat maneuverability. Boom and zoom beats dogfighting. Speed and altitude beat agility and tradition. American pilots stop trying to be British Spitfire jockeys. They become something new: heavyweight champions of the sky. They don't dance with the enemy, they hit them like a freight train and climb away before the enemy can respond. This tactical evolution will define jet combat in Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. But it starts here, with immigrant engineers and farm boys learning to use physics as a weapon. And then comes the revelation that makes the P-47 irreplaceable: ground attack capability. The same durability that lets it survive German cannons makes it perfect for low-altitude strikes against ground targets. 850 caliber guns, plus bombs and rockets, turn the Thunderbolt into flying artillery. Pilots start hunting tanks, trains, trucks, troop concentrations. German soldiers learn to fear the sound of that R-2800 engine as much as Luftwaffe pilots do. They call them JBOs, Jag Bomber, fighter bombers. When you hear that sound, you run for cover, because 850 calories will turn a convoy into scrap metal in seconds. D-Day, June 6, 1944. P-47s provide air cover for the invasion, shredding German reinforcements trying to reach the beaches. In the months that follow, as Allied armies push into France, Thunderbolts become the close air support platform that makes German counterattacks impossible. By the end of the war, the statistics are undeniable. Over 3,000 aerial victories in the European theater alone. Thousands more ground targets destroyed: tanks, locomotives, bridges, command posts. Loss ratios approaching 5-1 in favor of the P-47. The plane everyone dismissed became the weapon that broke German air superiority over Europe. Pilot nicknames multiply. The Jug stops being an insult and becomes a badge of honor. The Unbreakable. The Hun Killer. Aircraft nose art features thunderbolts, lightning, symbols of unstoppable force. This becomes a teaching moment that echoes through military history. Never underestimate American industrial might combined with tactical adaptability. The Germans built precision instruments of war. The Americans built a hammer. And when the hammer fell, precision didn't matter. The transformation is complete. The joke became the legend. And the legend saved thousands of American lives. This story isn't really about airplanes. It's about what happens when arrogance meets adaptability. When tradition crashes into innovation. When people who are underestimated decide to prove their worth not with words, but with results. The Germans built beautiful fighters. Works of engineering art, refined through years of tactical evolution. The FW-190 and Bf-109 were elegant solutions to aerial combat, nimble, sophisticated, flown by pilots trained in a warrior tradition stretching back generations. The Americans built a flying tank designed by an immigrant from Georgia, powered by an engine that valued raw power over refinement, armed with enough guns to destroy anything in the sky. It wasn't elegant. It was effective. And when the shooting started, effectiveness was all that mattered. Here's the lesson the Luftwaffe learned too late: never confuse elegance with superiority. Beauty doesn't win wars. Results do. The P-47 wasn't pretty. It didn't need to be. It just needed to bring American boys home alive and leave German fighters burning in French fields. It did both, better than anyone imagined. But there's something deeper here, something that resonates beyond tactics and technology. The P-47 Thunderbolt embodies a fundamentally different philosophy of war and of society. The Luftwaffe represented the old world. Elite warriors and precision machines, an aristocracy of the air. You became a fighter pilot through breeding, connections, adherence to doctrine. You proved your worth through individual glory, through kill counts and medals and the respect of fellow aces. The P-47 represented the new world. Democracy in aluminum and steel. You didn't need to be special to fly it, you needed to be trained. You didn't need aristocratic heritage, you needed courage and adaptability. The sons of Polish immigrants, Italian stoneworkers, Jewish shopkeepers, Iowa farmers, they all climbed into that cockpit and became deadly. That terrified the Germans more than the guns did. Because it meant they weren't fighting an elite, they were fighting an entire nation of people who refused to accept limits based on background or tradition. Alexander Kartveli fled the old world because it had no place for people like him. He came to America because it promised something radical: your worth is determined by what you can do, not where you came from. The P-47 Thunderbolt is that promise made real, stamped in metal, proven in combat. Every pilot who flew it was making a statement. Francis Gabreski, fighting for his parents' occupied homeland and his adopted country. Robert Johnson, surviving impossible damage because an immigrant engineer believed Americans deserved the best protection possible. Hub Zemke, rejecting traditional dogfighting doctrine and inventing new ways to win. They were saying, we don't need to fight your fight. We'll fight our own way. And we'll win. Adaptability over tradition. That's the core truth. The Luftwaffe clung to tactics that had worked since Spain, France, Britain. When those tactics stopped working against the P-47, they tried variations, but always within the same framework. Always assuming that agility and experience would prevail. The Americans threw out the rulebook. They analyzed their weaknesses, leveraged their strengths, and created entirely new tactical doctrine. Boom and zoom. Energy fighting. Using altitude and speed as weapons in themselves. The side that learns faster wins. Always. This matters beyond 1943. It matters now. Because the same pattern repeats through history. Established powers underestimating newcomers. Traditional excellence dismissing practical innovation. Aristocracies assuming their refinement makes them superior to democratic determination. And repeatedly, the underestimated win. Not because they're naturally better, but because they have to be adaptive, creative, relentless. Because they can't rely on tradition or status, only on results. The P-47 pilots didn't come from families of warriors. They came from families of immigrants and farmers and workers. They didn't have generations of military tradition. They had a few months of training and a mission: protect the bombers, kill the enemy, come home. So they learned. They adapted. They took a plane everyone mocked and turned it into the weapon that broke the Luftwaffe's back. That's not just military history. That's the story of democracy versus authoritarianism. Of merit versus aristocracy. Of people who are told they can't compete, proving that they can, and will, dominate. The Germans laughed at the P-47 Thunderbolt. They laughed at the immigrant designer. They laughed at the farm boy pilots. And then 850 caliber machine guns taught them the most expensive lesson in warfare: never underestimate the people who have everything to prove and nothing to lose except each other. We started with German pilots laughing at a flying milk jug. We ended with that same aircraft becoming the most produced American fighter of World War II and a symbol of what happens when innovation meets determination. The P-47 Thunderbolt didn't win by being the most agile fighter in the sky. It didn't win through elegance or tradition. It won by being unbreakable, by hitting harder than anything else above 20,000 feet, and by being flown by pilots who refused to accept that their background or inexperience made them inferior. Alexander Kartvelli fled the old world and built a masterpiece in the new one. Robert Johnson survived 21 cannon hits because that masterpiece was designed to bring Americans home. Francis Gabreski turned mockery into 28 confirmed kills. Hub Zemke threw out the tactical rulebook and wrote a new one. They proved something that echoes far beyond 1943. When someone underestimates you, you have two choices: argue or prove them wrong. The Thunderbolt pilots chose the latter. They let 850 caliber machine guns do the talking. If this story moved you, do me a favor, hit that like button and share this video. These pilots, this immigrant engineer, this chapter of history deserves to be remembered. Drop a comment. What's your favorite underdog story from World War II? Have you ever been underestimated and had to prove someone wrong? I want to hear it. And subscribe if you want more stories like this, moments when courage met innovation and changed history. When ordinary people did extraordinary things.